happy to be here with the wonderful Carol Reed.
Thank you,
You're
Andy.
welcome. Carol, you're a teacher and a writer for young learners, correct?
That's right. I'm a teacher and a writer and a trainer.
And a trainer, and all of the above.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
you gave a workshop, was that yesterday?
I gave a workshop on Tuesday.
On Tuesday.
And this year I did a workshop on creative teaching, creative learning. Because creativity and the implications of that for our everyday teaching is an area of huge interest, I think, for me, because I think quite often there's quite a lot of sloppy thinking around creativity.
Okay.
And that actually creativity involves a lot of disciplined thinking, attention to detail, effort, and I wanted really to explore this in the context of my workshop. And something that I started off with, just to set the scene, was a contrast between two paintings, Velázquez Las Meninas, which I brought with me from the Prado in Madrid. And
I wondered where that
was gone. And compared that with a take on that painting done by Picasso, and used that to talk about, well, for a start, how creativity always arises from something. There is always an idea, an artifact, a problem from which creativity arrives. The second thing, that it engages the person who's involved in the creative processes. It's very similar to the concept, Csikszentmihalyi's concept of flow, where the emotions are positively engaged in achieving a goal. And the other thing that I wanted to point out right at the very beginning is how actually to be creative you need a framework. And that having a framework to be creative is actually energizing and liberating. If you're just told to create out of thin air, it often produces lethargy. And then what I went on to do in the workshop, because I actually thought you can't do a workshop on creativity unless you do something a little bit creative.
Good point.
So I structured the workshop around an interactive story. And in order to do that, I borrowed from children's literature, which is obviously one of my passions, a story by Babette Cole in its original version called Princess Smarty Pants. And I did an adaptation, not to do with young learners because my workshop was general, but I called it Princess Crystal Creative. And she set a task, these questions on creativity, for the princes. So we had Prince Pedagogue, Prince Strategist, Prince Semantics, and the workshop part of my session was everybody helping the princes to answer the questions. And at the end of the workshop, I invited the participants to think of an end to the story.
Oh, great.
So that was kind of how it was structured. And along the way, we looked at things like, what is the difference between creative teaching and teaching for creativity? Because I think it's quite important for us when we're planning lessons, planning units of work, to actually unpack those terms and be aware of what our objectives are.
That's a really good point,
So that if we're involved in creative teaching, that is, we're using creative techniques in order to be effective and to get our message across to students. Whereas if we're teaching for creativity, it's actually what we're doing is empowering the learners to be creative themselves. And actually the route to doing that will involve guided and structured tasks that allow for that creativity to happen. One of the things, just going back to the Velázquez and Velázquez and Picasso example that I gave at the beginning, Picasso actually did 58 takes on that Velázquez painting. So just in an art context, you see that effort and attention to detail. And I think as teachers, we need not to confuse when we're teaching creatively with actually what we're hoping our students can do. And in fact, creativity on the part of the teacher, if a teacher is so creative all the time, it actually may smother the learner's creativity, because they may sit back and sort of watch this teacher being creative.
Right, and it's also more teacher-centered as well, instead of...
That's absolutely right, Andy. That's a very, very good point. And the other thing I also wanted to look at was how that contrasts with creative learning. Creative learning to do with different mixes of collaborative work and individual work, to do with being engaged and involved with the pedagogic decisions that are made in the classroom, actually the decisions also about the curriculum, and also to do with developing critical evaluation, so that students are learning to critically evaluate both their own performance and their teachers and the material.
Right.
And so in a way, a close cousin of creative learning, we could see learner autonomy and the whole development of metacognitive skills. And also perhaps for those who are familiar with it, I know you both are, but people out there, the whole area of dogme, which also would involve that, the course book issues aside.
But this sort of, I mean, I love this focus on creativity, and I kind of enjoyed being sort of creating materials for my students when I was a teacher. But I think for a lot of teachers, it can be a bit intimidating, and they think, well, I'm not creative. Does that mean I'm a bad teacher, or can I learn to be creative? How do you deal with that?
I think that's a very good point, Nick, and I certainly was not giving any kind of message that we all have to be creative. I think my point was that in educational circles, creativity, just the very mention of the word, tends to get wise nods around the room. And what we need to look at is actually what our objectives are. And in terms of strategies to help us be creative, we did, as part of the workshop, Prince Strategist was asked this question and came
what
up.
What did he come up with?
Well, he came up with a number of strategy. He came up with a whole range of strategies, actually. But just to give you a few examples, because we also looked at what big C creativity and little c creativity. So some of the strategies, for example, very familiar one to most language teachers, would actually be to do with how we use questions. Our use of closed questions, which tend to close communication and creativity down, and open questions, possibility questions.
So closed being sort of getting a yes/no answer, and open where you don't know the answer and you want to get a lot more out of it.
Exactly. And of course there's a place for closed questions in the language class, but not only. And possibility questions, a good example of a possibility question is what if? That actually is engaging students in thinking creatively. Another strategy, for example, which is also very simple and easy to implement in a way, is making connections between different areas, both, for example, the home life of the students, what they do at work and in the classroom, what they do in different areas of the curriculum, and also the personal relevance. A lot of teachers these days, for example, are teaching CLIL, and something like, which is a familiar CLIL topic, might be teaching the water cycle. But actually that can be, quite dry and boring unless you give it that personal relevance. What does the water cycle mean to you?
Chris is juggling a mandarin slice at the moment, so that means we've got to draw this to a close. But we would like to ask you a bit, because you're the new president, aren't you?
The new vice president. I introduced you incorrectly. I should have said welcome to Madam Incoming Vice President Reed.
Thank you, Andy.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm new incoming vice president, less than 24 hours. We had the online voting. I feel hugely honoured to have been elected to this role, and also very challenged and
That's a good thing,
and very delighted.
Yeah.
And I see, I mean, one of the lovely things about the IATEFL, the cycle of this, is that in my first year I'm vice president, so I'm very much in learning role before I actually take over being as president. And there have been some wonderful initiatives in IATEFL recently. I mean, this conference itself is you know, an indication of this. We've got the lovely conference app this year, so there's some wonderful. I feel it's a very exciting moment to be joining at this level of IATEFL, and I've been involved in IATEFL for years and years actually on the Young Learner Committee, on the Publications Committee, this year on the Conference Committee. I've been very much involved in aspects of what's going on here. So, yes, I'm very delighted.
Well, that's
Thank
great.
you.
Congratulations, and I hope you enjoy it and it doesn't overwork you too much.
Thank you, Nick. So do I. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. It's still sunny, as you can see. We're baking here under the sunlight now and wishing for it. We'll be back soon. We're going to have lunch and then we'll be back in about an hour, I guess.
Yeah, 2 o'clock UK.
2 o'clock UK time, about an hour. So come back in an hour.